Hello, everybody. We are back. Ready for another round? All right. Hey. All right. Let's take a look at this current state of things here. So my intention for today is to actually update you guys, update on all the shaders, all the stuff that I changed for the past couple of days, so you can like have like the latest of everything. So this is like my current render. I was just doing a few tweaks here. I started rendering yesterday night, but they didn't go, as planned. There's a couple of things here that I have to tweak, but just so you can see that this is the actual render I'm running, that we were running with the latest of everything. So that's basically like my shader in there. There's a couple of things here, for example, when I talk about like the teeth, in case you guys are gonna add teeth. So I'm gonna talk about the way I built them, and then the shader, which is still in progress. It looks very metallic at this point, but I can tell you about like my intention for it. But I can definitely update you guys on the skin shader, which is the most important part here, because I changed a bunch of things since last time I spoke about it. So I'm gonna just open the skin shader, like the whole network, and tell you guys what's plugged in there and what's the each one of those values, how they are plugged in there. You should be able to get something more realistic, So that's basically what I have for now for this guy. So I'm gonna just stop right now, and let's start by talking about what I have plugged in here. So like shader wise, right? Let's start with let's try the skin first, obviously. So let's open the skin in here, and let's get so you guys can copy all those values in there, and then obviously it's going to be dependent on the type of maps that you have assigned, but I can show you visually how my maps look like, so you can have at least like a good reference for them. So again, like for the base here, we're not using, right? Because you're using one for the subsurface, so that's completely mixed. I'm going to just close the base. And then I'm going to start with the specular again. So specular, we're going to open my ZBrush and see how my specular map looks like. It's going to look like this. I actually tweaked the specular map to look darker in here. So you're going to see visually it looks like this now. Because one thing that I normally do, I start painting things here and then I bring it to Maya. And then as much as possible, if I can try to just like tweak back in ZBrush and then assign all those changes that I did inside of Maya, instead of like having to rely on Maya for everything, like tweaking those maps in Maya. I actually brought it back and I actually cranked the contrast in here. And then to do that, the only thing I did was to go to the polypaint, right? And then in polypaint, just like adjust colors. So I just went there, and then one of those here, I think was the gamma. I just brought it down, right? It was something more like this before. And then I kind of like brought it down. So I got something darker now. So that's basically like visually, that's how my map looks like. So there's a little bit more separation, between the areas that I need more shininess and stuff. So I still have to do more work, obviously, but see, like it's very, very simple map with very broad kind of specular. So basically, this is the map that's plugging my specular in here. So let's take a look at it. It looks like this. So that's it, specular. If I click view in here, should be able to see it. Sometimes you open, sometimes it doesn't. So, but that's basically the same map I just showed you. So let's look at the color balance. I did a little bit of tweak. So basically, like I went, I think, too far with the darkness. So I actually exposed again a little bit. So I think that's what I did in here. But visually, it would be something like that's a little bit lighter overall than this, but still darker than what I had originally. So it's kind of like this back and forth, I could potentially come back here, adjust the colors, give a little bit more gamma to it, right? And then bring it to Maya. And then in that case, I would just like zero this one, and then it would be good, But it's kind of like you have to test first to see if the values are translating correctly, because it's kind of like an arbitrary thing between two different softwares, right? But it doesn't quite matter, because you can always tweak between the two of them. It's just like a matter of preference, I guess. So then for the color, I have white. And then the white only shows at 0.811 here if you're using color management. So if you turn it off, it's 1 basically. But if you turn it on, it kind of manages it to a little bit lower than that. But it's basically plain white. For the roughness channel I'm using, again, visually is going to look like this. Roughness, very simple. again, a little bit more contrasted than before, right? Inside of the mouth, I still have to, you know, paint a little bit in there. It's basically like super rough. I would like to have a little bit of reflection just in case, you know, it's like if the light catches some of the surface from the inside, I can see a little bit more reflection inside. It would be cool. But that's basically like my roughness map. It looks like this, right? Like mostly a very pale shade of gray. So the average would be something like this. And you can see it's right in the middle, and there's around what, like 134. So that's like my middle level. And then it goes down and then up again. But very simple. Everything that's supposed not to have any micro bump, it's painted in black. And then everything that's supposed to have a ton of micro bump, then it's painted in white, and everything in between, right? So including like the, you know, the lids in here, they are very, very black because I don't want any, you know, micro bump in those lids. I want them to be driven just by the displacement map, and I can control how much like shininess I want to have in them. So that's basically plugged right here in the roughness. And let's look at the map if I have any tweaks. So the tweak that I have in here, apparently I brought up the black levels. So like instead of like having like full black like this, I have something that's, I tweaked like, so the black, it looks a little bit more, you know, it's like a little bit more white. So basically it would be something similar to coming back in here and adjusting the colors. Let's say, I think is this the one? Yeah, something like that. So basically like from 0 here, I would bring it up slightly like that. And that would give me something similar to what Maya is seeing internally, right? So instead of like having like a super shiny inside of the mouth and the lids, it gets a tiny little bit of the bump, very, very little. And then most of it is shiny overall. But that's kind of like trying to translate between Maya and ZBrush just visually for you to see what I'm doing there, right? So basically that's what it is here. If it's 0, then the blacks are fully black. If I crank this one a little bit more towards white, right? So basically like the blacks become white in here. So that's basically the only tweak I have in there. And then going back here to transmission is gonna be empty because the skin, we are not using any transmission. For the radios, I start playing with the idea that I mentioned before to have like, you know, I mentioned something about like around the eyelids to have something that was a little bit more, less saturated, just to kill a little bit of the, actually for the eyelids would be the opposite. It would have more saturation to get a little bit more of the subsurface effect. And then in certain other areas, I would just like kill it and bring this down. So I mentioned to you guys, I would copy this color in here and bring it to ZBrush, actually the uncalibrated color. So it would be this one here. And then I would bring to ZBrush, paint the entire thing that color, and then just go in specific areas and just paint off what I didn't want. I use this technique in a model, this one here. I can show you. I don't know if you're going to be able to see in the render though. So this guy here, for example, originally when I did the first renders, I noticed that those bumps in here, they were getting like super red. They're still kind of red in here, as you can tell in there. So those bumps, they're looking very red because the subsurface is getting really strong in there. So I had a map that I kind of like, everything was the same color other than those little bumps. They had like a more desaturated tone and a little bit darker as well. So in the final version, you don't see it so much scattered anymore, you know. Although it's a scar tissue and you should see some more scattering there, probably because the skin is a little thinner. Still, you know, I reduced a lot of that. So you can use this technique, you know, it's like instead of like having a plain color like this, it's gonna be like a map, right? So subsurface at maximum, subsurface color, I'm using the color itself of the map that I painted. But before, in between this one and the map itself, remember that we added this node from Arnold that was AI color correct. So I added this node here, plugged like the input. Yeah, you can actually expand this one if you want to see. Let's look at the map or the shader network from here. Let's look at this guy graph. So around here, you're gonna see, so I have my color correct node that's basically like the output of it goes to the subsurface color, and the input comes from the map itself, right? So I plug the map to input and plug the output into the subsurface color. And then I have this in-between color correction node here that we can actually tweak for whatever we need. So when I look at the color now in ZBrush, that's another thing that I changed. Remember, like originally it was very dark, and it's kind of like it was kind of like suntanned, right? And then I thought it was kind of weird, and I think what happened is that I had some HDRI that maybe was a little bit overexposed. It kind of looks correct, but then testing it under other lighting situations, it looked too dark. You know, that's why it's important to you know, to try with different lighting situations so you can actually see if the skin looks more neutral. You know, especially like a very well controlled environment like studio lighting, just with a few like area lights calibrated to between like 6,500 and 7,000 Kelvin. So you can get like kind of like a day light, like white light, and then you can actually see the skin as is, you know. So at this point here, the same deal. I told you, like, I tested it and it worked fine. To even though you have like a HD geometry and you have like the colors painted into HD geometry, if you go to the highest level before HD geometry, so at your highest level here at the base, right? If you go to your color adjustments under the poly paint, you can adjust as much as you want here, and it shouldn't affect the HDRI, you know. At least in my case here, it didn't. So I play a lot with the gamma, so it was kind of like this before. So I punched like the gamma up, and then I reduced, I believe, was the saturation as well, because saturation before is a little bit like that. So I kind of like brought it down a little bit. So I made the skin a little bit paler. What happens that people don't take into account, and I forgot to mention this one before when we were painting the maps, but I always mention in my classes, is that you have to try to imagine the skin without the blood, right? Like in the fat tissue and all that stuff, which is very hard. I mean, like if you're trying to copy the skin tones from a picture, you're actually copying everything that you see in the picture, and that includes the subsurface scattering, right? I mean, like there's a lot of physical things happening in that image you're trying to copy. So if you see the skin and it looks a little bit like orangey or something, it's because like there's a lot of stuff. There's a lighting entering the skin and reflecting inside of it and propagating, and then it's gonna hit like different types of tissues. You're gonna have like in areas that you have bone, it's gonna be a little bit different. In the areas you have like more fat tissue, you're gonna have like a little bit yellower, right? Areas of like a high blood flow are gonna have more reds and stuff. But let's pretend you just like you're able to actually remove all this stuff and drain the skin out of all this this live tissue, right? Like in blood and all this stuff. You would end up like with a skin that would probably look, if you try to emulate here, it would be desaturated, and it would be something like maybe like going almost like towards blue, but this obviously is like too much right here. I don't know if I can do, let me try just like by tweaking maybe the blue intensity here. Yeah, something like that. So it would be slightly bluer, right? And then very desaturated. And then when you add the subsurface scattering to it with that color that we have, it basically like compensates for it. And then you kind of like end up with a color that looks more natural in relation to whatever reference you're using, you know? So it's almost like you have to imagine the color with the subsurface scatter like drain out of it, which is basically like taking out like a lot of the blood and all that stuff. So the intention to have this color correction node in here is to be able to calibrate that, you know, because you see like right there, if I put back to 1 in here, you're gonna see it looks very, it looks a little bit dark overall. And his skin, look at the reference I have, it's very, very pale, you know. So let's see, where is it? What happened? Oh, I'm looking at the wrong folder, man. I was scared for a second. I was like, what's going on? There's a folder I had with an old backup, and then the entire folder for Sammy is missing from there. I was like, what the heck? Yeah, it's here. But yeah, in some of those pictures I saw him, for example, like this, right? He looks very, very pale. So I kind of like, I was trying to get a little bit more of the pinkish tone to his skin. So that's why we have access to this, the hue shift, right? If I exaggerate for you to see here, for example, if I bring the hue shift down, look how pink is gonna turn right there, right? So I have to go like very delicate with it So I came like to the conclusion that probably like 0.0 something, like 5. You would add just a little bit more pink to it, and then that was it, right? And then for the gamma here, I wanted to get a little bit wider. So if I go too strong, obviously you're gonna get like super pale, right? And that's not what you want. That's like a, yeah, it doesn't look like someone alive, right? But just enough to bring it out, you know, it's like this color, and bring it down overall, like the intensity of the color, just to get a little bit more of this pale kind of look to him, you know. So basically, like this color correction node helps for that kind of stuff. Saturation, same thing. Sometimes you paint a map, and you can see a lot of CG work out there. You know, it's like it looks like this, like very orangey, right? And sometimes we don't know what to do. You know, it's like we just paint the maps, and then you plug in there, and you expect it to work. Sometimes it's even a map that comes from a picture, for example, right? But what's happening is that you're plugging a map that comes from a picture without taking into account what I just said about like the subsurface being baked already in there. So basically, like you're doubling down with the subsurface scattering. So if the source material is a picture that has like a lot of scattering happening, and the image is already like maybe under a lighting that's it's a little bit warmer already instead of something that's daylight calibrated, right? So you're gonna have already from the get-go a little bit more orange tone, right? That's kind of artificially in there because, you know, you're not under a controlled environment. But then every time you bring it to Maya to try to render, then the subsurface scattering is adding more redness and more yellow and more orange to the whole thing. And then you end up with something like this, right? So the color tone is very important that you nail it, you know? Sometimes like if your model looks completely off, and you know that all the shader parameters are in place, it's more likely the color is off. So the best thing to do is to have like a reference that you actually can rely on the side, right? Put a reference in there, make sure that's got like a studio lighting. For example, like this one here, they probably like took a picture with, you know, it's like, it seems like there is some area lights being used in here, like flashlights from the sides, and looks like it's you know, white calibrated, right? The background is a little bit warmer, probably has incandescent light and everything, but where she's exposing here, it looks like more like a whiter light, right? So try to use this kind of reference if you can. And then in this case here, so I'm shifting the hue slightly just towards pink, very, very little. The gamma a little bit brighter than what I just showed you in ZBrush. And then everything else is the same. So, and the map is here. So let's see if we did any tweaks in the map. Nope, it's all default. So it's the same map that came from ZBrush. So from this, we actually just adding a little bit more exposure to it overall. And then like 0.2, right? So 20% more. And then basically like turning a little bit more towards pink. So you could potentially, again, come back here, you know, so I can just like tweak the gamma, add a little bit more brightness to the whole thing, right? So from 1, you would go to something, I don't know, something like that. And then you would probably like crank the red and the blue so you can get the pink kind of tone, right? So if I crank the red here, that would look too red. I'm rendering red, that's why it's so slow. So red and blue, you would make like some magenta in there, right? So if you added something like this, you probably could simulate that type of effect that Maya is doing there, right? But it's cool to have that color control node in there so you don't have to do all this guessing game here. But if you want to do that, you know, it's like nothing stops you. Like I said, sometimes I rather clean up some of my nodes in Maya and make sure that I have the changes mostly in ZBrush, even if I have to do tiny little adjustments back in Maya, you know. So that's basically what I'm doing for this guy here. So let's go back here to the shader network. So that was our subsurface scattering. Let's just stop it here for a second. And then for the scale, I changed from the original one that we are using. I'm using like 125 now. And it's giving me this nice, you know, under the eye kind of like scatter right there, which is not like burning red. You know, it's like it has this orange desaturated tone, which looks very nice depending of the type of angle that you have. It looks very nice. So 125 is looking very nice. And this one here, the anisotropy was, you're kind of like I was using like 0.1, I believe, before. I used for my old lady 0.1, In his case, I just added a tiny little bit of front scatter because I wanted to be a little bit more cohesive with the lighting, you know. So instead of like cheating in like more front scattering, I'm actually almost zeroing it, but still cheating a little bit. Yeah, it's a little bit of this milky kind of quality to the skin, which I like. And then for the radius, we changed the color as well. Turning off the color management, if I look here from 0 to 1, we have this. So 982, 0.982, 0.6, and 0.434. And then if I turn on the color management, I get something very different, which looks like this. 0.854, 0.690, and then 0.602. So like very different, right? Like this one, it's a big jump. It's almost like it goes like from 6 and 4, it goes to 6 and 6, right? Or almost 7 and 6 when you color corrected. But yeah, but that's basically the values I have here. In HSV, this is the color corrected version. So 20.965, then 0.295, and then 0.854. And then without the color correction, those are the values I have: 18.135, 0.558, and then 0.982. So that's basically it for the subsurface. For the coat, so we spoke about the specular. We are using 1.55 in here for the index of refraction. For the coat, we are doing a little bit differently. So index of refraction is the same, but the roughness, I don't have a roughness map. I'm just using like an overall roughness of 450, which is very broad. It's just to create that effect of the sweat, right? That stuff that I was showing like on my Stan Winston, like in his forehead, you can see clearly. It's a very broad speck, not super shiny, but he casts like this very broad kind of specular because I'm using a broad spec right here. Color, I'm using white as well, pure white. And then for the coat, the weight, it's basically the same specular map that I use for the spec, just plugged here as a separate instead of like a plugged in both at the same time, both channels. I copied it first and then I plugged as a separate map so I can actually have independent control. So it's this specular map with a little tweak in the alpha gain in here. And that's gonna be depending of how your model was sculpted and how the other maps are playing to it, right? Because remember, like if I have like the alpha gain at 1 in here, so that means like all the whites gonna be very white pretty much. And then every time I start bringing down, the whites become grayer and grayer until like when you get to here, then they are black, right? So 0.72 is basically like a removing like 30% of the whiteness of the map. So it's bringing everything a little bit more gray overall. But again, like let's say your character has like deeper pores, for example, and you have already like a heavier micro bump everywhere, right? So that means you're probably gonna have to use like a full-on 1 in here because it's already diffusing a lot just by having more depth and more breakup in the surface. You're not gonna be able to see too much specular. But in the case of this guy here, I mean, like his skin is not like the pores are not super deep or anything like that. And he has this softness. It's kind of like a soft skin. And to be able to do this, create this flashiness, I had to actually reduce my original specular. Otherwise, it would look too shiny, you know. So I wanted to have a little bit more of the shininess just in the nose and, you know, catching a little bit of highlights like in the eyelids and some in the forehead, but not much anywhere else, right? So that's basically the setting I have in there. And so for Shin, using a tiny little bit, 0.025 and then 0.300 in here. For the geometry, you're using the cell noise with those parameters. So noise 2, you have to remember to turn this one off, otherwise it doesn't affect it correctly. So turn it off. And then those are my octaves like 8. Lacunarity like 1.195, and then for the scale overall is 50 50 50, right? And that's about it for it. Now we have another map that one is actually plugged in the bump value, right? So that's like the cell noise is plugged to the bump value, but the bump depth, now I have to plug something else, otherwise I'm going to have to do the control using this slider here, right? But then it's going to control everything the same way, so the height is not going to have any variation. So if you add more roughness, it's going to be more rough everywhere. So that's why we need that roughness map plugged in here. So the roughness map looked like this. roughness, this guy here is very similar to the, actually, this is the bump depth in here. Okay, so the bump depth originally, I was using separate from the roughness, but because they follow the same kind of structure, you know, they are very similar between each other. I ended up like replacing my bump depth with the roughness. And just because, you know, it's like to have like a matching map in there. So basically like the bump depth in here became kind of obsolete. So I'm using like the same roughness map. Actually, oh, I thought I had done this before, but actually I'm using the bump depth. So, okay, never mind what I just said. So this is the bump depth. I thought I changed it before. So this is the bump depth and then the roughness, which is basically the same thing, you know. You could, for example, like use the same map for both and just do a few tweaks so it doesn't look too saturated, you know. That's basically like it's a little bit smaller overall, the intensity for it. So, or you could just like bring the same map and just tweak around here. The thing about the micro bump is that it's very sensitive. So if you plug the map straight away with alpha gain at 1 in here, don't forget to turn on your alpha is luminance as well. That would be super rough, the whole surface, right? Remember, like when we were trying to add a bump overall, like in the skin, if you add anything that's too huge in here, it can be any type of bump. It's going to be like, it's going to look terrible. So we normally apply bumps like using this slider in here at around like 0.02 or 0.01. You know, it's like small, tiny values produce a lot of effect. So that's the same principle I'm using for the mapping here. So instead of like using full on 1 for the alpha gain, that's the default, I'm trying to bring down to that same universe of this like tiny little scale, you know, so 0.015. And then everything from that point on it's relative to the intensities that we have in here. So basically like everything is being tweaked by Maya. This is the bump depth right here. To get down visually would be something like this. So poly paint, just colors. So it would be something like pretty much like this. Something is hard to see, but you're still gonna see, for example, like those areas of black, gonna have like less bump, right? And they're gonna have more bump in those areas of white in there. But painting this here in Zebra should be very difficult because you're not seeing enough variation, right? So the best thing here is to actually paint it with this full intensity that you can actually see good levels of black and white, and then just tweak this value down so you can get just a tiny little bit of bump. So that's basically what I did in there. Under Arnold, I didn't do anything different. Effects, nothing different here. And then let's see if we have anything else plugged. Advanced, I removed like any caustics internal reflection, so there's nothing in there. So that's basically like the entire skin network, basically. It's like super simple, right? You saw the entire network is like this big. And it's this big because I think there's certain things that kind of, I repeated a few times. So basically, we have one map here for the specular, which is repeated in here. So I copied the same map, right? This one is plugged to the spec. This one is plugged to the coat, right? A copy of each other. Then this is the first map. I have a bump depth. There's a second map. I have the texture map in here, which is basically like the color map, right? And then the roughness right there, and the displacement map. So the displacement map is plugged as well. And then we have those other extra nodes, like I have this color correct node in here, and I have this cell noise, both from Arnold, right? AI cell noise and AI color correct. So those are the extra ones for the bump depth and then for the correction of the color itself. But very super simple shader network. You know, it's like I'm not like the best technician out there, so I'm more like an artist, and I try to simplify as much as possible, trying to push as far as I can go with like making things as realistic as I can without adding a ton of shit that's just gonna be like more complicated for you, you know? So with the simple shader network, it's a great starting point. If later on after this class, you guys realize like, oh man, Chris, like he was missing the opportunity of adding this and that. You look so much better if you add those other nodes. By all means, just do it. You know, it's like in my case, because I'm old and tired, I'm probably going to stick with my simple shader network because it works for, you know, most of my characters, and I get away with murder with them. So that's the shader network. So let's just explore very quickly here the model itself, just as a reminder, what we have plugged in the model itself, right? Because make sure that you have everything set to render. So under the,
Chris,
hello?
I got a question.
Yep.
About the subsurface scattering,
Mm-hmm.
my model has like a more tanned skin, and I'm feeling that it's looking kind of more dry, not very fleshy. Do you think I
Uh-huh.
should crank up the scale of the subsurface or the radius?
That's a good question because I think I was fighting that as well with my old lady because she had a little bit more of a tan skin, and
Yeah, it's kind of the same model.
yeah. So what I had to do with her, I think that's the reason I cranked this front scatter. So I had like a scale that was a little bit bigger than this, so probably like 130 or 135. And for the try to crank like this anisotropy kind of channel in here, like to 0.1 to start with, and make sure that you have a radius that might be a little bit more saturated than you would expect with this type of skin. Maybe a little bit more saturated than that. And yeah, I start with that. I think that should help.
Cool. Nice.
Yeah,
Thanks.
no problem. And so going back here, because I want to make sure that things are ironed out for you guys. It's like we have just like today and tomorrow, and I want to make sure that things are kind of like, okay, now I get all the concept of the entire process in here. So starting with the shader network, the eyes I didn't change much, so probably like it's going to be pretty much the same shaders that you guys are using already. So you should be getting similar results already. I saw some of your renders. I can tell they're looking better. So I'm using like the opaque for the skin. Under the SSS set name, make sure that everything involving subsurface scattering in the face, teeth, tongue, eyes, irises, whatever uses SSS in your scene around the face, make sure that they all match the same name under this. So you have to go each one of those meshes and match the same name. It can be a different name from this, but it has to match among each other. So subdivision, I'm using Catmull Clark, and then iterations, I'm using 4. If I want like a more precise, definition of the pores and everything, I would go to 5, but it starts to get very heavy in the renders. So I wouldn't go like past 4 unless you want to go like for super close-ups, then you can go higher. I'm changing this adaptive space from the default raster to object, and then this one originally it starts with pin corners or pin borders, something like that. And I'm switching to linear so it can actually match like an unsmooth UV, which is basically the same way that comes from ZBrush, just to prevent any like seams, right? Let's say you exported everything from ZBrush in linear, or meaning like you don't have any smooth in your UVs, but then you got in here and now all of a sudden you're pinning the borders and everything is smooth. You're probably gonna get like a thin little lines right in the splits between the UDIM aisles, So make sure that you match like the same type of UV smoothing between ZBrush and Maya. Now for the displacement attributes, remember that originally my model, it doesn't look like the skin got the pores too deep, right? Like it looks very, very subtle. So if I look around here, it's like subtle, but like not, awfully subtle. I mean, like if I compare this, let me just bring one here as an example. So for my old lady, I posted like a long time ago, like a progress of her skin detail. See if it's handy here. Well, I had it pretty handy before. Where did it go? That's weird. Let's see, maybe it's inside of this folder here. Huh. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I have it. That's so weird. Let's try to find it very quickly here. Let's see my Instagram. Oh no. Let's see. I think I posted down here when I was in progress. So you're gonna see like the pores, this one. It was deeper, it was like overall was deeper than everything I have with him at this point. It was kind of like everything was a little deeper. So you see like it's much more like soft in here, right? Softer stuff. So what I did here, I actually cheated, right? So instead of like the height of my displacement being at 1, which is a default, I actually crank it to 1.5. And I'm getting just perfect amount now, it's like it's something that again, I could go back and forth with ZBrush, and I could, for example, manually make things deeper in there, recut all the wrinkles and all that stuff. But since they all live in the same universe, the same level, and they have a good conversation, right? Like everything is kind of like balanced within this universe here of this depth that I have. So instead of like redoing the whole thing, I just pretend that my sculpture is going to be softer as it is here. And then every new detail that I add from this point on, I try to keep in the same universe. You know, it's like a little bit softer overall. As long as you have like enough support in your base mesh to, you know, it's like to support like those bigger lines, for example, this one, when you double the displacement or put like 1.5, this shouldn't grow, you know, it should stay pretty close to the surface in here. Now, if you have something that's very low res like that, and you sculpt like a big spike or something, right? That's probably gonna pop a lot if you use like 1.5. But if you have enough support overall for the mid-resolution mesh, you shouldn't have a lot of problem, you know. So that's why it's working pretty nicely in here. So that's my little tweak in there. So that covers the, you know, the shader for the skin, and then for the parameters for the face. All the curiosity, if you want to look, I mean, like the glass, there's something that's very interesting if you're using glasses, trying to render glasses. You have to follow kind of like the how you say, like the physical attributes of a lens, right? If you just get like, for example, a sphere and you squish that sphere, you're not going to get like the you know, the type of lens, if you cut the lens in half, for example, with laser, right? You're going to see a cut that has a different type of shape depending on the different condition, right? So if the person has a problem like seeing from a distance, it's going to have a different type of profile. You see like that from the inside here, this cut here, it's curved outside, and then inside is a little bit more square, it's a little bit more flat. So it's like flatter inside right there, and a little bit more puffy outside, right? So that's one type. This is kind of like the kind of thing, like I don't know what type of lenses prescription he had, right? But if you look, for example, like types of glass, let's see, oops, oh sure, glasses, lenses or something like that. Let's see if we can find here. There's one that I saw, profile, glass lenses and refraction. I think I've searched for that one before. So right here, for example, right? Lens thickness comparison. There's this type of lens in here, right? Like you're gonna get like a little bit flatter outside and a little bit more curved inside. So it's a little bit different. You have like those types of lenses, like similar to the one I'm using there, right? And then this other type in here. So there's a bunch of different, depending on the type of prescription, you're gonna have different ones, you know? So look at this, like it goes from this shape to that shape. So in all of them, when you model, you have to make sure that you're actually following this structure in here. Otherwise the refraction is gonna look completely different, you know? And that's a tricky thing. For example, if you see sometimes like a picture of someone wearing glasses and the eyes look super tiny, right? Because like it has a different type of refraction that's making everything smaller. So it's probably like something that's, I would say like those ones maybe, because those ones definitely gonna amplify things, gonna make the eyes slightly bigger. And when I was looking at his pictures, I was seeing his eyes get a little bit bigger. So that's why I kept this one with this kind of profile shape in there. Eventually I can try to do a couple of things. I can either keep like the refraction index to something like, let's see how much I have for it. I have at specular, so index of refractions at 1.520. But let's say if you want to keep something like, what's the refraction of the water? It's like 1.6, isn't it? Like, let's see, water refraction index. Is that 1.6 or 1.30 something? It's 133. Okay, so let's say like you have like something similar to refraction of water, or let's see like acrylic. Refractive index. So acrylic is higher. So you see like 1.52, right? So I'm using like 1.52 here. So it's pretty much like acrylic. But then basically you would have to compensate, instead of like changing this value in here, you would have to make the lens bulge further, right? Like to increase that effect, instead of like playing with the index of refraction, because this is kind of like, you can cheat it You can do, for example, like a 1.6 something here, and then it's gonna do the same effect as a lens that was like a little bit thicker, right? But if you can do this more physically, just like establish what's the type of material, and then you just play with the thickness of it until you get like a closer mesh to the reference, you know, that should be good. And then to start with, what I did for my lenses, I just went to the presets, I went to glass, and I just did a replace. So I started with, like, you can start with any AI standard surface and then you just run the preset and replace it. But then I tweaked my, my specular levels. I brought down like to 0.18. The roughness, I actually, originally it's just like, it's 0. So it's like completely glass, like mirror. So I added a little bit more roughness to it. So 0.06. Then here I changed to 1.52. Transmission, it's 100%, so like it's completely transparent. And then for the coat, I changed a little bit as well, so 0.18. And then the roughness is larger, so 0.150. This is gonna give me like a broader kind of type of reflection. So it's gonna look slightly blurry when you look at the, you know, if you have like a window reflecting to it, slightly blurry. And the index of refraction here is not gonna affect like the refraction itself. It's mostly like the amount of specular. I'm using 1.2. If you crank this number too high, sometimes it starts getting more metallic. So I would keep kind of like small, you know, it's like, I would say like smaller than 1.5 for sure. So that's basically like let's see if I have anything else plugged in here. That's basically the lens. It was like starting with the preset and just changing the specular, like I said. So that's what I did in there. In terms of let's see, like the Velus hair. Let's see what we have for the settings here for the specular and everything. I told you guys that I did some tweaks to prevent like those little fireflies, you know, it's like sometimes you get super hot spots in the specular. And then to prevent that, what I did, so for the melanin, I'm using just a little bit of it. So it's not completely white. So it gets a little bit yellow, but not much. So 0.05. Then for the roughness, I'm cranking a little bit higher so I don't get like those hot specks. It's gonna be a little bit more of a broad kind of roughness. But this one is the most important one. By default, it starts with 1.3 or 1.5, something like that. I'm bringing it down to 1.002. And that was me basically like running a tiny little spot and looking, for example, like that spot was being hit by light from a certain angle. So I had like something close up like that with a little window, just rendering that one and seeing how it behaved, just like tweaked by like little bit by little bit. And I came down like all the way to almost 1 to be able to eliminate that, you know, it's like those fireflies and hot spots, and still get the, you know, it's like the peach fuzz to read nicely from a certain angle in other shots, you know, so you still can see it, but it's very, very subtle now. So that's the tweak that I did. And then when it comes to the shape itself, the things that I mentioned that I did, if you go down all the way to Arnold, see I switched right here from ribbon to thick, and it gave me like a nicer look. Let's see if I switch here, if you can see visually. Probably not going to be able to see visually in here, but you definitely see in the render, you know, it's like it calculates better. So this is like using thick for the eyelashes, thick as well, for the eyelashes, thick as well. For the eyelashes, I'm using like everything default in the visibility in here, right? Like this is all from Arnold under your shape node, right? Like under your XGen. So everything is on. But when it comes to the Velus hair, I turned off the cast shadow and I turned off the diffuse transmission and specular transmission, because it's such a small effect that I think like all these are more time consuming to render, and they don't produce any effect that's completely visible, you know? So the only thing I kept was this self shadow, because if you don't have it on, that they kind of glow in the dark, you know? It's like the light's not gonna affect them correctly. So if you have self shadows, at least like looks like they calculate the shadows on themselves and they go darker in those areas of less light. So that's basically what I did for those guys. Eyes, we covered, so I'm not gonna be touching on that. And then let's look at the rest of the stuff here. I thought about doing like a pass, for example, in different things in ZBrush, and comment on stuff that I know that can be tricky, you know, it's like kind of like a little traps to avoid. Sorry. and then do kind of like a little pass. Let's say like almost like if you guys are just watching me working on my own stuff, like after the class, the stuff that kind of normally do. So what I see, for example, like things that I can improve here. There's one thing that bothers me, which is I can show you like in the actual Photoshop here, like the render I did last night. The teeth is very metallic, so I'm not liking it. And there's a lot of very strong spots in his skin right now, like reddish spots. So let's just open my, I posted this one on my Instagram if you want to check it out. I have like a bunch of work I posted since 1999. This one here being the 1999 one. Look at that. 1999, man. This was like soft image, was modeled with a NURBS sphere, and then NURBS sphere for the ears as well. Amazing. So let's go back here. Chris, personal projects, and let's get Sammy and then images. This is the latest one that I rendered last night, which didn't come out the way I expected. So again, I'm gonna do my little trick that I passed to you guys yesterday, which is like my little script to convert things to aces, right? If you don't know how to create those scripts, it's very easy. You can just go to your action tab in Photoshop, and you can either, for example, create a new setting here. You know, for example, I could just create a new set. Let's see, like color correction or something like that. All right, so now I have a little folder in there. You don't need to do it. You can just create the action straight away, but I have the little folder so things are separate in there. Let me just minimize this guy here, and so I can see those values in there. And then I'm gonna click this one. I'm gonna create a new action in here, basically. Actually, a new action right here. So if I wanna create something that I can repeat every time, we just create an action, give a name to it like aces to Photoshop, for example, something like that, right? And now I can copy those values that I see right there. So the way it works is like this. You just like do anything and just record it, right? So let me just uncheck this. So basically, I'm just gonna create like an adjustment layer in here, gonna be a exposure. And I'm just gonna copy those values that I see in there. So this one is gonna be minus 0.07. This one is gonna be 0.04, like that. And then the last one is gonna be 0.43. So that gives me basically what I was seeing in my Maya render, right? How can I tell? Is because, like I said before, to do this, I actually save the PNG out of Arnold first, because the PNG comes exactly like you see it in Arnold, and the 32-bit maps don't, right? They come very washed out. So, and then I put like in the background, and I had, you know, it's like I was like tweaking back and forth until I got to something that's pretty much indistinguishable. You know, it's like it's pretty much spot on. I even posted a little GIF, I think, like in my page on Facebook. You know, it's like you cannot tell the difference visually. But obviously, if you put like a difference, put one overlapping the other one, you're gonna notice very little areas where you need some adjustments and stuff to look perfect, but it's pretty much spot on, you know. So you can definitely use it. So now that I have this one created in there, I can just say, okay, so that's good. I can just stop my action in here, right? So now I have this action saved right there, aces to PS, like we did before. So if I want to zero the whole thing to see the original image, you can go to the history and just click this one, the top. So that's basically what it came from, straight from Arnold, right? So I go back to my actions, and now I'm gonna use this guy here we just created, just play it, and now you have it in there, right? Now let's say you wanna go one step ahead. You can click the last action, that one. Like you have the beginning, you have adjustment layer, there's this one. I wanna add I'm gonna append another action to this whole thing. So I'm gonna click record right here at the end of it, click record again. You can just say like image mode 16 bits, so we can convert from 32 to 16. I'm gonna do a merge, and here I'm gonna switch from local adaptation to exposure in gamma, right? And I just click OK, and now I can stop my action again. So now that's appended in there, right? So I can do the same thing. I can go to history, remove everything, it's back to 32 bits, right? But now if I go to my actions and click this guy here, it's gonna convert everything and convert to 16. So from this point on here, it's easy to just go to filter, Just use my alien skin, right? Like the filter that I was showing you guys the other day. And then here, you know, it's like I have this little setting that I did. If you press spacebar, you can see the before and after, right? So before, after. So it's adding this bloom kind of effect, a little bit like exaggerating the motion, the radial blur, right? Like I'm using a bokeh in here, which is exaggerating quite a bit. You can even go further like that, right? Super blurry, make like look like a miniature. And a little bit of that lens flare coming from the side that I showed you guys the other day as well. So something like this, you know, it's like look the skin to look even more pale than it was before. So a little bit of bluish tone added to it. And then I can just apply it here. And now you can see like the before and after right there, right? But looking at this guy here now, if you press F, you actually can hide everything, right? Let's do a Control R to hide my ruler. Control R, that, and then F. So now if I see this guy here, I can start like picking apart, right? Just like I do with your work, I do with my work. I'm even worse with my work than I am with you guys. So don't feel bad if I'm, you know, it's like, you know, commenting on your stuff. I mean, my stuff, I pick it apart all the time. So I like the levels around the eyes in here. They look kind of nice, but the teeth really doesn't work. You know, it's like, looks very metallic. There's like this extra sheen to it. So I'm gonna have to change that. So that's one of my notes to myself. The other one is like, you see like those specks, right? There's spots, like dark, 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 dark. There's a lot of dark spots in here, which are nice to break up like the, you know, so the skin doesn't look like monotone, right? But if it's too much like that, it doesn't work, you know. So it looks like someone who has some kind of disease or something, you know, look at that. Around here, sometimes it's more tolerable. Because like people have like more of those freckles, you know, it's like, especially when you get older or someone with his condition, you know, it's like you can see that he has some spots. So sometimes you get those liver spots around the temples in here, like the temporalis line, and but not around here, right? That would look a little bit weird. So those two notes are the first ones I'm going to try to address. So what I can try to do, I can first like fix the color. So I can show you like how I'm going to do that, and then bring it to Maya again, and then we can take a look at the teeth. Since we're going to be doing this in ZBrush, I can show you the teeth model in there. I think I show you a little bit of it, but I can show you the passes I'm using right now. So let's go back here.
Hey, Chris.
Yes.
Can I ask you a question about the eyes since you're zooming in on those?
Sure, yeah.
I was looking back through some of your old works, and I found this image. Let me throw it up here real fast.
Okay.
Oh boy. Dropbox is going to make me search through all this.
Don't worry.
This image.
Take a look.
This old iris you made for the shoot, I can't remember the title you have for it. The little person.
Oh yeah. Let me see. Where did I save it? Find in folder. Okay, here. All right, I'm saving the desktop. Okay. Oh yeah. This one is an old, yeah. Yes, exactly.
And I was just curious because I was looking through your stuff. Is there a reason why I felt like I didn't see you use that one again since that model? Is there a reason you switched to the new one that you have like the turntable, not the turntable, the time lapse for and everything?
Yeah, you know, it's like I think the principle in here it's a promising one. You know, it's like I'm using those little micro tentacles in there, right? Like kind of like I started with a duplicate of the same mesh many times, and I tweaked them in ZBrush to have that. But I think like the areas that are blending with it, they're not good. You know, it's like when I look at the model, it's super detailed. Obviously, you can see a lot of stuff. But then when you look at the actual eye, you know, it's like you're not gonna see exactly like you're seeing here. Although, like for the renders, that time when I was doing this little research in there, it actually looked quite nice. But I think I get a more natural look, you know, nowadays. I had in the other monitor. Sorry. Yeah, we're talking about this one. Yeah, so it's kind of like all those little guys. They look very nice in the render, but they don't quite look as natural, you know. So let's look, for example, if I can find it here, the render of that project specifically. Let's see, little person.
Yeah, because you had some close-ups of the
Yeah.
their eye that looked pretty good in my opinion. I thought they looked great. Um, and I've tried getting that really, you can find those really fibrous eye references.
Yes.
And I tried kind of getting that before, actually, back when I was in school, and
Uh-huh.
had some serious technical restrictions when it came to rigging. And I was like, man, I don't know how I do that. And then I stumbled upon your image and was like, wow, I'd have to go something way higher res than I was allowed to work on.
Yeah, I would say like you can get a lot of the stuff here. For example, even in HD geometry, if you want to go like that far with those little micro tendrils in there. But it's funny, I cannot see my, oh, there you go. There's an eyeball here. Oh, I think this is just, yeah, this is just like the color that I was using back in the day. It's funny, I cannot see my renders in here. I saw it today in some other folder. Yeah, but I know what you mean. Like I switched, it's like I was using this one before. It was kind of like high res, but the principle of it, like the disc itself, it's basically the same thing. All I did here was to remove the little tendrils and then just add this disc. Now, I could try, for example, to just bring those tendrils back and just mix with the new eye and see what I get, because I mean, since I have like a nicer structure now, so like those little caves that I have sculpted by hand now, maybe it would be nice, like in those little holes where they show, to capture some of those little guys. It would be kind of interesting. I don't know how much gain is going to be over this, but yeah, something to try. Yeah, every new model, man, I keep like testing different things, and then I kind of like, oh, it looks cool now, but then I look again and I was like, yeah, you know what? And sometimes I flip flop.
Yeah, I was looking through a bunch of my old files and I found this, and I looked at the title and I was like, oh wait, this is Chris's model.
Yeah.
And I put a link up to the Artstation thing you have to this person
Oh, okay.
in the chat, just in case people were wondering.
Okay.
I also had a question when you were looking at the glasses. Is there a reason that you're like double subdividing things, like you're using both the 3 smooth mesh thing and Cat Clark on top of it?
What do you mean? Like, let me see, like in the properties?
Like for your glasses,
Uh-huh.
you have them smoothed in the viewport, and
Oh,
they
okay.
have 3 iterations on top of them.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, like I didn't have to smooth here in the viewport. I mean, like this should take care of it, But
Okay, I wasn't sure if they were like, if there's a reason you're doing that or not. If
no, not necessarily. I mean, like I could start with it's just like because I like seeing things smooth in the viewport, and I think it's actually adding to this. I understand what you're saying. Like it's kind of like it's doubling down, because I think like back in the day with Mental Ray, if you had like a smooth in the viewport, you would completely ignore. You would
yeah, it
take in
was terrible about that.
Yeah, it would always take in account the subdivisions you're putting in here. But apparently Arnold calculates the subdivision, the viewport, as the subdivision levels. So yeah, you're right. I mean, like it probably is subdivided like 6 times or something. But because it's such a like low res mesh, I mean, like it ends up like, it's like 2,300 faces. It ends up like not being heavy at all. But yeah, it's something for me to think about for sure. So let's take a look here. So let's start with the color stuff that I was mentioning. So like if I look at the color, you see, let's go to HD here. Another thing I would like to do is to sculpt some more of the ears and show and talk about them a little bit more. But let's see how much stuff we can squeeze today. We still have tomorrow. Tomorrow would be nice to actually save at least some time to talk about a little bit about the industry, experience in this area, some stuff like that inspires me, a little bit of, history, whatever. And end up like kind of in a kind of positive note. I know it's not too bad, like it's not negative. The tone that I do those classes, I at least I try to pretend I'm excited. No, I'm actually very excited all the time. I'm actually excited to be able to do work, personal work, and especially in front of artists like you guys. So it's always a pleasure. So let's take a look here. Let's press A, and then this is basically the way my model looks like. If you want to take a look overall, it has a lot of that directionality brush that we added everywhere, right? So like you see like that the pores themselves, they start becoming a little bit, not secondary, but they become a little bit more subtle in relation to all the other passes on top of it, right? just to make sure that the pores are not looking like completely plain, right? So some of them in here, they're looking a little bit more plain, but that's expected in this area, right? Here as well, I would have more of them visible if I didn't have all those stretched lines and everything, right? But for the most part, you see like it's a lot of extra work on top of what I had. A lot of it is done with that very automatic brush, right? This one. And some of them is like just like custom carved, right? A lot of this stuff is custom carved. So that's basically the way it looks. But for the color, let's take a look here. You see like this entire area here, it starts to look a little bit sick. And the subsurface gather is going to be kind of sensitive to this, you know, difference in color in here. And it's really is going to make everything look a little bit too much. So the way I try to level things out is, let's get like, let's see, single pore, let's see, color, skin bump, skin pores. Where is it? Skin random. I renamed the other day so I can remember, but then I forgot what's the logic I used behind it. Because, oh man, what a mess. So this one here, color spray. So I have a color spray 2 for some reason. Pretty sure I'm never going to know what the number 1 is because I'm trying to use the latest and greatest, right? No, I don't know. I'm dumb. All right, so let's take a look here. I'm going to turn off first this color modifier from my spray. The spray is basically like same way that we are doing a lot of this stuff, right? Just a simple spray with an alpha. You pick the one you like the best, like depending on the size, right? Sometimes you can even pick something like this guy right here. So this guy gives a nice little, you know, kind of like a randomness to it. There's this guy as well. Instead of like a round shape, we have like this one. I use this one for certain things like liver spots and stuff like that. And then for my alpha here, let's see if I modified it. Almost nothing, right? Just very little modification. So if I exaggerate here so you can see what I'm painting, let's get color, let's see, black. Oh, black cannot be black, right? Because we have that problem with, so basically like that's what he's doing right now. So if I test it and it's too much, let's just reduce this flow to 0. Now I get a little bit more spread out, right? Looks a little bit too small. So let's try to get the bigger brush, maybe 37. Oh, 37 is actually small, huh? See which one I was using before. Oh, I think it was 37. It's just like my brush looks very small overall. And it still is getting a little bit too, even though my flow is pretty low, I'm still getting a lot of flow. Sometimes you can actually change the placement. And then what's going to happen is that you're going to have a little bit less control. Instead of like controlling the area where you're painting, it's going to spread around a little bit more. But at least you get more, you know, it's like more distance between them. So if you have something like this, that should, you know, work for this area. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to just sample a neutral area here, something around here. And basically like try to even this whole thing out here, remove some of those spots, right? But I'm using like 100% intensity right now, actually 57. I'm gonna reduce this just to kind of like add a little makeup on top because I kind of like the tone, but I just don't like how exaggerated it is. Let me go back here to 0.5 instead of like spreading too much, Jesus, something like that. I'm gonna just like use a very low intensity instead. So it's gonna be a little bit more concentrated, but with the low intensity should be good. So around here, I'm gonna start painting. Let's actually sample from here. So I'm gonna just remove all the stuff that's more aggressive here, you know, try to get more even with the skin. And then later I can add another pass with the lighter tone. But really try to remove a lot of this super spotty stuff, you know, around here, just with a thin layer like that. Same for the necking here. Look at that. Looks a little bit too much, right? Let's add a little bit more intensity. So it goes a little bit faster. Yeah, it's just like, I'd rather have like a lighter tone than a super dark like spot in there because they really show up in the subsurface gathering, you know, just like level this whole thing. I noticed this area here as well. It has a little bit too much red. Just gonna blend it. I'm gonna sample the color from around this area so it's a little closer. Just like blend it back. It's very important to have variation in the skin. You know, it's like a very common mistake is to have a skin that looks a little bit too generic. You know, it's like it doesn't have anything interesting in terms of variation. So like you can start with those passes, adding like those broad kind of like spray brushes, but then you can go custom. You know, it's like at this point I don't have anything custom here, like specific spots, for example. We can add a few so you can see it. Let me just like blend this stuff a little bit more again. So around here. So like I said, like you can get away with those spots around this area. They should be fine. But as you go lower, especially around neck and everything, that's gonna be a little too much, you know. It's like, so I have to kind of level them. Let's do that. And then those guys here as well. And then we can actually introduce some of them a little bit more customized, right? Like some more precise, controlled spots in the skin. You're gonna see this a lot. I mean, like if you're sculpting, you know, likeness, you're definitely gonna see people like with very specific birth signals and, you know, it's like birthmarks and some other stuff like spots everywhere. So in his case here, I don't even know if he has a lot because all my pictures, all my references, they're super low resolution, which is kind of like it's a mixed bag, right? If you work with low resolutions, either you can be like you know, a freaking genius because you're doing a miracle, recreating something you're not even seeing, right? Or you can be considered like a hack because you're not nailing the likeness as you should. Because come on, like someone finds in the future, you know, it's like, oh look, doesn't look anything like that, right? The guy posts like a higher resolution that he found somewhere, and then debunks you. He's like, you have to see the reference I'm using, man. It's like nothing. But it gives me this excuse, you know, it's like to be creative with my portraits. Basically, like you can either go like full-on technician and then try to nail everything perfectly. In that case, like that's what we do in the industry, right? Like you get scans for everything, and you basically like nail everything to look as perfect as possible. But then when you're doing something in your personal work, you want to, you know, at least like what I think is like, I want to be able to figure it out certain forms. And I treat each one of those characters as a new challenge in the sense that it's a big puzzle, you know. It's like, look at the size of this reference, man. I like the reference, like they're ridiculous, you know. This is like the best stuff I have. This is for lighting. So I found this one on the internet. It's kind of nice, kind of like a one point light. And this one was light with teeth. So it was kind of like looking at her teeth and seeing the type of reflection. That's what I'm gonna have to emulate next. But you see, like my references are all like, this is the best resolution I have. This is the best picture I have. Let's see the size of this picture. Resolution. Let's see. Oh, that's a good resolution. It's 2000 by 1365. But if you consider just the head, right? It's not a lot. I mean, like, look at that. You cannot, it's just like noise, right? But what I can try to do is to actually use my knowledge, like in, you know, accumulated over the years, kind of like try to imagine how those forms actually read in a real person, right? And then try to incorporate that. So I have like freedom to place the pores and wrinkles anywhere I want, as long as they are kind of like convincing they are like in the expected places and everything, right? But I have a lot of freedom for that. I think the most important part here is to actually learn how to incorporate like the relationships between the forms, you know. If you see something like this, like those super thin lines, they look simple at first, you know. It's like if your eyes are not refined yet, like to observe the things, you start like seeing like, oh, you just like carve like one, you just count, right? 1, 2, 3, and just done, right? But when you start looking closely, I mean, like I don't even have that in mind. I might have to incorporate. But this line here, for example, it doesn't continue all the way down. It starts like to mix with this one. This one overlaps with it and crosses around here. And this one is more like let's say like this one, this wrinkle in here, and this one, they're kind of at the same level, right? Like the same kind of like they're protruding out as much as each other. So this one is in the front. This one is slightly on the back. This one is slightly on the back and flatter. And then it goes inside because you have like, there's like a magic muscle pulling the whole thing from there. It's kind of like a system of cables being pulled, right? You can see right here. So there is a cable, a thick one right here underneath, another one right here. So it's causing this whole thing to, to compress against each other. But this is underneath this one. So this one is the most pronounced one. Same with here, right? You're gonna have this one and then that one. So all those things, like it doesn't happen like in a day. It's like you have to refine your eyes. Like for each one of the models, you're gonna go further and further and try to see what's going on with the form. And then sometimes it looks like the forms are in place, but the relationships are wrong. So for example, like even if you do like a blueprint and you kind of like nail the perfectly like the position of the wrinkles and everything, if they don't have the right relationship, meaning like which one is in the front, which one is in the back, which one is flatter, which one is rounder, it ends up that, you can nail from the front, but then if you turn your model around, it's going to fall apart. Everything is going to look a little weird, So it's very important to actually learn how to observe those forms, and treat each one of those elements as a whole creature, for example, right? When you're sculpting a whole human body, for example, you're paying attention to the things that you have like baked into your brain, right? Most of the anatomy tricks that you learn and all that stuff. And then when you're sculpting a face, sometimes like, oh yeah, I already sculpted the whole body. So the face is just gonna, just copy the position of the wrinkles and everything and call it done, right? And it's basically like it's a whole new creature right here. It's a whole new human body you have to sculpt. Every time you see something like this, it's a whole creature, man. It has primary, secondary, tertiary forms. Everything here, there, So the quality of the work is going to be relative to the amount of observation that you put. It's like the amount of effort you put to decipher those forms. It's like, what's the hierarchy here? What are the primary forms? How they are basically like becoming the secondary forms? How the secondary forms are becoming the tertiary forms? Because there's a flow for everything, right? They start a little bit bigger and they become smaller and smaller and smaller, right? Everything. So observing the form, it's like same for the necking here. I mean, like I could sculpt the neck like as a cylinder, right? And just put those little, points here from the sternocleidomastoids and call it done. Maybe 2 lines in there, put a little bit of the volume, that's done. But then if you start to look closely, I mean, like you see like there's a little bit more of a sharp point in here that I can see in other pictures as well. This is not a straight round line. It's kind of broken up in some spots in here. There's some like little spots in here in the skin. They're kind of like little dents in the skin, It's like they're not like a super smooth skin. I have all this, micro chicken skin in here, right? Like all those little guys that I have to sculpt as well. And then you have those, it's like it can be like stretch marks, for example, like those ones that create like micro scars. Same around there. There's a micro stretch happening there. All this stuff. If I want to do something quick, I can just like slap, like I said, like the basic forms and that call it done, right? But the thing that makes your work shine, I believe, is like when you start incorporating those imperfections that a lot of people are not able to see. It's like, so you can feel special. It's like some people, like you look at other people's work, you're gonna be like, you see the eyebrow is sculptured, and then you're gonna see like, oh, it looks pretty nice, but I mean, it looks very plain. And then you're gonna go to the eyebrow and you're gonna be, well, wait a minute, there is a volume in here. That's probably a vein, right? That's causing that. There's a vein that's coming around here. But then there's all of the other guys here. You probably like other veins popping out in there, but maybe like some little scar marks, or maybe like some micro stretching like in here, right? Like some micro stretching. It's basically like challenging yourself every time to start observing the forms, not from a distance like this, because it's important, obviously. You need to a distance like this is helpful to nail like the facial expression, for example, right? But to refine the forms, you need to go close, And like I said, I have a ton of room to imagine. And I'm pretty sure if I saw like this picture in super high res, a lot of the stuff I did is wrong. And I'm aware of that because I done this in the past. It's impossible to see something that you simply cannot see, right? Like it's just, there's no information in there. But what I can do, I can actually paint an impression of this person. It's like I can make him like look convincing enough with the right skin tone, with a nice like a eye shader that actually is going to sell the character, is going to look alive or not, right? And everything else here is going to be like picking like those iconic places in the face, like this type of folds in here, you know, it's like the main ones at least capture them, and then try to reimagine the other ones around them as something that's part of the system, right? So basically, like if you have those wrinkles going that way, you know that they're going to end in a certain way. They're going to fade out in there. Those ones, they're going to merge into smaller folds in here. And then around the eyelids in here are going to become like very thin lines as well, you know, it's like around there. So, you know, kind of like using a crossing reference between what you can see and the stuff that you saw in the past in other people with similar characteristics, you know, it's like someone older or something. So it's like, to me, that's the thrilling part, you know, it's like, is to reimagine those characters and to have like enough room to be creative, you know, otherwise it becomes super boring. You know, it's like copying something straight away. It's boring as fuck. I mean, like, it doesn't thrill me, you know. It's like, I like this thing about like being able to sculpt the pores by hand, being able to just like sculpt stuff from low resolution images, you know, because I have a ton of room to just reimagine those characters. That's the part that I like the most. But going back in here, let's just finish this little tweaks in here. We're gonna export this map. Let's see what time that is. Like, okay, still have almost an hour, so we are good. And I'm gonna show you the teeth next, so you can actually have that. Try to give you like a lot of tools so you can actually, you know, have fun when the classes are over tomorrow, which is always a sad day, man. Like, it's always like we do this thing together, you know, it's like every night, almost every night for like a month. And then when it's over, it's like, oh man, don't get me wrong. I'm happy I can rest a little bit, you know, but it's like the kind of thing, like I miss it, you know, it's like, man, I'm not going to be doing work, you know, it's just like, and I'm not going to be seeing people, you know, it's like sculpting their own thing. And yeah, so it's like, but at the same time, I mean, like you see guys like Roger, you know, it's like in our group, he was my student like months ago, man, and he keeps cranking new models all the time, and each one is looking better and better. You have to see, like, take a look at Roger Magrini's stuff. He posted like an Asian girl today, and she looks amazing, you know. And you have to see, for example, like the type of work he was doing before the classes, before he started doing those classes. I'm not bragging or anything, you know. It's just something that's very, very clear how much he took those things to the heart, you know. And then of course, like, he started incorporating his own way of doing it. He got some inspiration from Sefki, and he's doing a lot of texturing XYZ mixed with his stuff now. So instead of like, you know, painful, you know, everything by hand like we were doing here, he is already speeding up his process. But, you know, it's like skin shader, all that stuff, like tricks for lighting, all that stuff he's using, you know. It's like, and he's so sweet too, you know. It's like he always gives credit to me, like, you know, like, oh, because of Chris Cosaba. But it's I met him in person, man, in Sao Paulo. And he's a super humble guy, super young, man. He's like 22 years old or 23. He's kicking ass already. So yeah, I have to watch my own butt. Those kids are coming hungry. But I'm like the dinosaur, you know. It's like I'm kind of like on my way out. I'm gonna retire and buy a little, you know, house like in a farm or something. Build some furniture until I die. Yeah. So no worries about competition at all. Just want to get better for myself, you know, but not like competing really. All right, so I think that takes care of that. Let's take a look at the teeth now. So first, let's export the color map, because that should be a very fast process here. I don't need to worry about the displacement at this point, right? Yeah, you see like the passes I did in here. I did a lot of that little pass that I showed you last time, which is the carve brush, using a very low intensity, like 1 or 2. And then just like from a distance, really carving like those bigger forms to redefine my my secondary forms. So I got more of this lining here around the temporalis here in the forehead. More of that one. You can see like there's a little bit of a little bumps and kind of like, not bumps, but like little indentations in there. Done with this brush as well. Same around here. So basically like using a very broad but small pointy brush, right? Like my alpha looks like this, is super pointy, but with a big brush, you know, like something like this, and really carving those areas to get some of those details, you know, it's like the subtlety of all of this stuff. Even like this area here, you see, like instead of like being like a plain form that's completely like looks like a single form, it's a little bit more broken up, and now I kind of split right here. There's a separation between it, right? It's a little bit more separation in there too. Some people have like a double lining here. My Dick Smith has that, you know, it's like the nasolabial fold is kind of like a double fold. And then later, my plan is to actually come and refine those lines. For example, like see this line here, it could come sharper around here and then fade into exactly like what I have in here. But it's important to be able to add a rhythm to everything. You know, it's like if you have like a sharp line like this, fade it. You know, it's like you have this one that looks too smooth, sharpen a little bit, and then fade it back to like softness. You know, all this stuff like really adds to the complexity of the form. I redefined the nose yesterday a little bit too. I kind of like brought this area here more into a curve. It was a little bit too flat before. This area here gets flatter and a little bit shallower like that because of the facial expression. So the muscles are being pulled that way. So that kind of like gets a little longer. So I did that as well. And then I actually reestablished this little plane right here. So I have like this little plane underneath the nose right there. And then tweaked a little bit the tip of it as well. So things here and there, you know, it's like just to help out. Let's export this map.
Hey, Chris, can I ask a question?
Yes, of course.
So I've been trying to figure out the topology for the last couple of days,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm used to doing game meshes. So
Yeah.
if it's not necessary, polygons tend to get really big. So like on the face, currently I have a lot of the face details really tight, and then the head gets more spread out with the polygon density.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Is that the right way to be going around doing this, or should I try to keep it as even as possible? Except for
I would say like as even as possible. I mean, like my head here, it's a little bit more spread out. You can see that, but I mean, like my model is not ideal. For example, like something like this, if it was across the whole face, the same density would be nicer. But you see, like around here, my polygons, like especially like the pores, you start getting a little bit kind of like pixelated around this area. But it all depends. I mean, like if your character, for example, is going to have hair, I wouldn't mind, for example, if it was lower res around there. But anywhere, I would say like if you keep this area around, let's say like forehead, and then zygomatic towards like the side around here, around the mouth. So this face mask here, basically, that would be like the principal stuff, you know. And everything else you can get away with the less polygons. You can see mine is not perfectly distributed at all. But at least like in this areas here, I have like a little bit less, a little bit more density, you know, overall.
Gotcha. And do you have specific areas that you recommend for like polygroups or for the stars?
For polygroups, well, polygroups I like to keep like the top of the face like separated from the bottom part, so I can kind of like access this little area around here a little bit easier. You know, it's like if I want to hide stuff. So I like to split right at the mouth, like at the corners of the mouth. And then side to side, obviously. So like two different sides. And then some loops for the eyes. In this case here, I would rather, maybe like in the future, I'm going to do this, maybe split right where this edge is going to be. So it's easier for me to identify it. But right now what I have is looks more like this. So it goes all the way to inside. And then I have this pocket in there. But I would basically like, I would split probably like another loop around here in the future, do something like that. But yeah, nothing fancy, you know, it's like something that makes easier for you to first like to unwrap everything. It's going to be important to be able to unwrap everything, but also to do like quick selections in ZBrush, you know, it's like something you can just select the outside, right? Like the outer shell, and really hide this stuff that you're not going to use, you know, it's like, for example, the pockets inside of the eyes or the mouth, you should be able to just like get rid of it. And then obviously I have the lips in here as well. I need them. So let's, oops, what did I click? Let's get this guy and this guy. So basically like when I'm entering HD, that's all I see, you know. So I use those polygroups mostly for that kind of purpose, but also to be able to access certain areas like this corner in there.
Gotcha. Thank you so much.
No problem, man. You're welcome. All right, so let's name this guy here. Let's rename to albedo. That's like, I think I'm like version 29 now, so I keep like adding some iterations in there. Since it's just a color being exported, I don't need to create the morph target or anything. And I always do this thing almost like a superstition, you know. It's like I click RGB and I go all the way up to 100 before I export my texture maps. But I believe that this is done by the multi-map exporter already. You know, it's like I think he already, you know, in the script, it predicts, okay, during the export, I'm gonna turn on RGB and gonna crank to 100. But, you know, just to make sure that everything is working, I do that. So I'm gonna go to displacement, texture from polypaint. I'm gonna use 8K for the color because I wanna capture all those, you know, smaller details in the color, which you're not quite there yet, right? I can add like some more micro veins and all this stuff. And I wanna be able to capture them like super razor sharp. Map border at 12, same thing for the displacement. Switch morph target I don't need. And all this stuff is gonna be ignored because displacement map's not gonna be exported. So let's just do this. Source images, albedo 29. Should take a few seconds. Although it comes from HD, so it should, you know, be take a little bit longer than the usual, but it still should be probably like, I don't know, like 30 seconds or something, hopefully. And then let's bring it to Maya, and then let's take a look at the teeth here in ZBrush as well. What I have at this point. Let's talk about teeth as well. I capture a bunch of references, like stuff like that, you know, because we have always this impression that the teeth is super, you know, there's no kind of undulations or anything, right? It's kind of plain, but it has a lot of additional form in front of it. Let's see, there's another one that I capture here, which kind of like you can see. You know, it's like there's a lot of, you know, there's a transparency right there, right at the edge, right? Close to the edge. There's some other marks in here. All this stuff is very interesting, you know, to try to capture. Look at the transparency right there, right? This one is cool as well. And there's one here that's pretty wild. Look at this. It's got like a super macro in there, right? And really contrasted to be able to see those forms. And look at that, man. You have like this tiny micro undulations in there. You have like this, you know, like little cracks and things like that. And those micro bubbles as well. Pretty cool. You have like this line right around there, which is kind of cool. You know, it's like, I think this would be a cool exercise to do a likeness of a close-up shot like that, you know, because that's a great study. A case study here, right? I mean, like when I look at something like this, I have all those ideas. For example, like you see, like there's a line in here, which is basically like the saliva going around in there, but it's a constant line that goes all the way across, right? So you could use like a separate object for that, blending into the teeth and blending into the you know, the gums in here. And then right in the middle, you can just add some little bubbles in there just to break that. You have more bubbles in there. But it's almost like what we were doing with our tear line, right? You create like a curve in here, kind of like curved like that. And then one side basically like snaps to the teeth, the other one snaps in there. And another option would be to basically like create a cap for the teeth. For example, it would be a secondary object that would be on top of the teeth, and then blend it to the gums in here, but have like the whole thing being a saliva kind of pass. You know, it's like that. That way you could have like a lot of control where you want to reveal more of the saliva or not, you know, just like ideas. And then there's the sharpness right here at the edge as well. Not only that, there's the sharpness of the edge, but then, you know, it's like sometimes we model teeth, they look like some kind of candy, because you see like it's going almost straight. And then there's this bevel in here that's very, very small kind of angle, you know. And sometimes you do this angle too high like this, and it looks like just like a piece of candy, you know. It's like, doesn't look like a tooth. And there's this whole structure, you know. It's like if you look at the lighting traveling here, there's this flat surface right in the front, but then there's this line right here, which is splitting into two planes, right? So you have the thickness of the tooth in here, kind of like a box, and then you have the other plane in there, and then you have all this other stuff. So all those things are interesting to observe, you know, it's like, because sometimes realism is just like one tweak away, right? It's just like something like this you can actually incorporate. But obviously I'm not going to go as hardcore with all the imperfections in here, but just to have an idea about, like, you know, the kind of stuff we can do to incorporate some of those, you know, it's like more interesting aspects of the teeth. So let's see this one here, for example. This one is comparing like a yellower tooth to the whitish one, right? Like a little bit cleaner version of it, probably like after a treatment to, you know, to bright, how you say, like whitening, right? But it's very interesting to see. I mean, like the thing that happens very often is this, right? Like you see like this transparency here. So we're going to take a look at this transparency, and I'm going to introduce you guys to, you know, the principle of it and how I see it working as a shader. But at the same time, with the disclaimer that my teeth shader still looks like crap. But at least like I can point you to a direction that I think works, you know. So we're going to put this one on the side here. Let's look at the, I got a bunch now here. Let's look at the, okay, I export the map. So you have like the color maps in there. So starting with the bottom one, which I already painted a little bit more. So I got some color going on in there. So I started adding some of that, you know, those imperfections in the front, but they're still very thick at the top. I don't have that nice sharpness at the top, right? And he has this kind of like a baby teeth. You still see like the three little prongs in here. And then as you get older, right, like they start like polishing them, and they start getting like flatter and flatter, right? So I kind of like adding those ones because I saw some reference that he has those two ones on the side that look like baby teeth. And then those ones are a bit more polished for a reason, right? Probably like those ones are the one touching the food first, right? And those ones are kind of just taking a ride in there because they're much lower than the other ones. But in terms of the structure here of the mesh, it's basically like I started with, I can even show you how I kind of like did this in one of my past classes, which is, let's just get this one. So the beginning of it looked like this. It was super simple. Just so you guys can see it. Let's hide all this stuff. And then let's hide everything. Okay, so something like that. Let's hide this light too, and this one. So basically, like I started with creating a polygon primitive, and then I started with the cylinder. And then it was something like this. How many teeth we have again? Is like 32 or like, is that 16 each, like down there? And I don't remember now. Let's see, let's get this one here. So basically the principle in here is this. I'm gonna just click this guy, this one. Oops, is it this one? Yes. Okay, so the cylinder here, let's say like, let's pretend it's 32, okay? So basically like I would start with 16 subdivisions in here. Actually, I have to have 16 all the way to half. So I'm gonna try to start with 32 in here. So let's see, something like that. And then I can use like a cap. So I can actually increase like a cap like that, maybe a bunch of them. Something like that. And then now I can just like, this is just to start my, my model, right? Like for the teeth, that's kind of like the way I started. So basically I would just, let's go for the top. Just delete half of it like that, and then delete this whole area like that. So I would start with a little arc like that, you know, and then basically like poly modeling. I mean, like I'm not going to be teaching you guys that because it's just like the basic stuff, right? So just like I would make a little bit more of an arc like that, start something like that, maybe like move by hand some of those guys around here a little bit closer. Oops, what did I do there? A little bit closer, you know, it's like to the front, something like that. But the point is, I would extrude this thing next. So I'm just gonna bring this on here. I would extrude this one next to, for example, oh, I found out there's another thing I forgot to mention. Sorry, I had some vertices selected. Let's get this one here. I found out why I didn't have like my faces together. Remember, like I got to that problem before. It's because now they changed. It probably like for the past couple of versions, but before it was under your modification or selection or something like that. There is a checkbox that you would just check, and then you would keep face together. But now you have to come here, man, under the preferences, and you have the modeling here settings. You have like keep faces together, and that's basically what it does. You know, there's a shortcut you can use, like I think it's like Control Alt or something, or Shift Alt. There's a shortcut that you can actually use. Let me see if I can find it. Control. Oh, see it right there. So toggle keep faces together. You can do that with a shortcut. It's Shift Control actually. So you can do like that, you know. But I like having this on at all times. It makes no sense not having it on. So basically, I started like that, and then obviously later I can just like delete like this bottom part, and then start like maybe like, let's do something like double click this one. I can remove half of it. Let's see, delete, remove from here to here, and then to here, and maybe that one. And then, for example, I can start, you know, like bringing things a little bit more like in a shape like that. And just like, you know, slowly building based like a box modeling kind of thing, right? And then in this case here, I would start with something like that, pick like each other one or something like that. Or keep the faces separate instead of faces together, right? We can do that too. And just like basically extrude them and then do the opposite. Actually, I can do like that and just like shrink them a little bit so I can have a little room. So basically like starting a very simple kind of box modeling, you know, so I can getting everything in place. And then later I can just delete half of it and make sure that I have a perfectly symmetrical model. But, you know, it's like very simple stuff. So my base mesh started like that, very simple. And then once I have one subdivision level, then I start cutting things further. So I would just like go, mesh smooth. And then once I have something like this, then okay, now it's time to actually incorporate some more, spans here and there, and then get more and more of the shapes in place. So that's basically how I started it, you know. It's like, and at the end, cutting, recutting stuff, I got something more like this, right? So some of them are gonna have more of this little sharper line in here. Some of them are gonna have to follow more of this structure of the molar, right? But that's basically what I did, you know. It's like, it's just like box modeling basically. And the thing that I did here, I tried to make sure that the spans actually end right where against the gums. So I can actually easily select just the teeth separated from the gums. And that way I can paint them separately with polygroups. So that's basically what I did for the teeth. And then for the resolution, I'm using like not HD, is just like 5 million polygons. So that's basically what I'm doing there. And then in terms of sculpture, I mean, the stuff that I did in here, that if I can remember, instead of like using going to the highest resolution, I go kind of mid-res like that. And let's just turn on this one. And let's sculpt, for example, some sharper lines with my carve brush. Just bring, for example, like touch just the edge right here. And just incorporate like sharper line and then smooth a little bit closer to it. Just to get more of that, you know, it's like a little bit more of a thinner kind of layer. If you need to make this whole thing thinner, you can use your move brush, but then you can turn off, for example, your auto masking here, turn on the back face mask. So it actually don't affect the other side. And you can just like, you know, it's like with using the Alt button, just bring things a little bit closer together so you get like that area thinner. So at the end, you get like a thinner layer in there, right? So, and then if you want to smooth out, for example, this little baby teeth in here, I can just go to this guy, bring it down a little bit. Now I'm gonna have to turn on my backface masking, otherwise it's not gonna obey very well. And then I can just counter that effect that I had. I started with all of them looking like that by pulling those little prongs out like that. And then slightly for those guys here, slightly bringing them back, you know. So I'm gonna do like a little tweaking there. Trying to incorporate some of that stuff that I saw in the reference, you know, it's like tiny little micro, cuts and things like that, like scratches, right? So you can use your carve brush for all that stuff as well. So I'm gonna do like, let's do like from here, let's do a little stronger. So a little scratch right there, pull these ones out, kind of like go and dig in little dents here and there, you know, just with the carve brush. And then from time to time, you can go like a little bit longer like that. So you can start like incorporating more and more form to it, you know. Obviously, if you go too crazy with the noise in the surface, then that's going to affect the whole specular, right? Sometimes it's not like maybe like the desired effect. And now here you can see like I have the little plane that I was showing the reference on the sides of some of them, not all of them. I'm still working on that. But if I can go to a lower res, for example, like this, I can redefine it a little bit more. So I can get this line to read a little bit more as a plane. All with my carve brush, you know, it's just like using positive instead of like a negative version of it, right? And then smooth out any, you know, it's like if it's looking too visible, right? Just a little bit smooth. Something like that. And then again, like this, what I was talking about before, it was this, for example, this angle here, sometimes we tend to do like kind of round like that. And it doesn't quite sell, you know, it's like, it's better if you do like a sharper kind of corner like that, unless you have like broken teeth or something. And then in terms of anatomy of the teeth, you're gonna have to do your own little research. But yeah, there's a lot in here that I have to improve, you know, for example, like this connection between this area in the root, you see like it's kind of like messed up in there. So I have to actually go in there and add more form inside of it right here to get like this shape to be a little bit more in contact with the gums in there. And then the front part, I'm going to try to keep kind of like a little bit more on the flat kind of side of things. Just going to make it a little bit like that and then flatten it a little bit right there.
Hey, Chris.
Yes.
Did you model the inside of the teeth?
Oh, the inside, everything is part of the same model. It's like, I don't have like interpenetrations, you know? So for example, from the back here, I can show you like the negative version. It's like optional. Back in the day, you see like everything is, it's just how you call like a cage, right? Yeah. In the past, we had like this problem with the subsurface scattering, messing up things, you know? It's like, so if you have the teeth interpenetrating with the gums, you would have like all kinds of artifacts and everything. But I don't think Arnold has that. So I would leave it to you guys to experiment with it. You know, it's like, for example, you can start with a very simple geometry for the gums, stick the teeth in there. And if it works, then you don't need to worry about this stuff I'm doing here, you know? Now, the cool thing about this one is that there is no penetration unless, you know, there's something funky like those areas I'm fixing right now. And then, so once you have everything in place, you can control the specular with the specular map to get like a different type of look for the teeth and the gums. And it's just like a matter of like exporting a single map and you're done, you know? So kind of like, it's kind of cool to have like all together. And there is that advantage as well, which is to use this model here to create like saliva stuff. So the saliva, gonna just repeat what we did before. If you wanna add saliva, you can just like append like a Z-sphere. So append a Z-sphere to it. You can go to your Z-sphere in here. Let's turn on the teeth back here. So it's visible right there. Let's turn off everything else. Let's see this guy. And what else we have on this guy here. So now I have my Z-sphere selected. I have the teeth visible. You have your sketch in there. You can just go to your Z sketch right here. Turn edit sketch. And then you can just like go to town with like painting little saliva bubbles here. So just go.
So I was just wondering if you had extruded the inside because the teeth are hollow. I was just wondering if you might get a better, like a more accurate result from Arnold if there was multiple faces on the interior of the tooth.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, like the type of scatter, right, that you would get, maybe would be more precise. Yeah, it's a good exercise. I think you should try that and see if you get like a nicer result. You know, it's like, I think you should. Same kind of principle. You know, it's like when I look at the nose, for example, it would be nice if there is an actual object inside, like for the cartilage to block a little bit of the subsurface scattering. Sometimes it gets too glowy, but you know, it's all a matter of like, you know, the time and the energy you're going to spend, like if the result is going to actually yell like a good amount of result, you know, it's kind of like a big difference. Otherwise, sometimes it gets a little overkill. And I'm the first one to make everything a little overkill, you know, but still, I think I do a lot of things very simplified, but I think I could make things even simpler sometimes, you know.
On that same note, I was wondering, have you ever, you call them the hero lines, but have you ever embedded like a model of a vein like in the nose?
No, never tried.
So I was noticing your character has like a noticeable vein.
Uh-huh.
It might be interesting to try like putting an actual vein model inside of the surface to see like what would happen.
Yeah. I mean, like, man, everything is like good exercise, you know. It's like, I would try, probably not for this model, but I mean, like, I could definitely try it, you know. It's just like, do I have the time and the energy to do it? Yeah, like I'm trying to get the model done, like between this week and next week. Definitely not this week. I never finished the same week that the class is over because there's always like a lot of fine tweaking. But yeah, it's like it's a good one, man. I mean, like you're probably younger than me. I think you should try. So yeah, so like at this point here, I get like I can add like as many little micro bubbles or whatever in here, you know. Can have even add like some stuff around here, maybe like some funny stuff in there, like little tiny bubbles, maybe like in between here. It's cool, like this C sketch, because you can actually merge like side to side, for example, like that, and then you can just blend it back, and you can get this weird kind of little forms, probably leaked in there, huh? Kind of leaked in there. So you can actually just smooth it out, so it kind of brings back, it's like the old metal balls, right? Just renamed to Z-sphere. But yeah, you can get like all kinds of interesting effects like that. Some people sculpt muscles with that stuff. It's kind of interesting. So yeah, just like, let's say like at the end, if you're happy with the way you have your little micro bubbles in there, like for saliva, if you're gonna see, right? Like in his case, I don't think you're gonna see that much, but it would be nice, for example, to have like some of them kind of extruding out, like connecting between the top and the bottom teeth, for example, making like a little, you know, kind of connection between them. But I would have to make like obviously very, very thin. Let's see if it works with two subtools in here. You can do a test. So for example, between that one and this one, right? Just connect like that and just like blend it. And then maybe like add some more, too big. Add some more kind of like on top of it or something. That's a little funky right there. But yeah, you know what I mean. So once you have that transforming to a polygon, then you can actually sculpt it, right? So just like a little bit like that. Some more. Let's see what happens. Like, let's just transform this whole thing to an actual mesh. So you go to your unified skin, and if I just do a preview, it's going to be pretty. Is it previewing? Oh, sure. It should be the adaptive skin, maybe. Oh, it's unified. Let's try subdivision a little bit higher, and let's make sure I have the right model selected as well. Because if it's the teeth, you're not gonna. Yeah, it's this here. Okay, cool. Let's see, unified skin. Okay, now it's doing it. So I have to have like some more subdivisions here. Okay, and then let's try resolution higher than that. Okay, it's getting better, higher. Something like that. I think that one should be actually okay to start sculpting. Let's try higher. Yeah, something like that. And now we have to accept it. So we can you can just do like a make polymesh 3D, and that basically is baked in there. So I can now just like append it to here. So let's get this append, make polymesh 3D. So this guy now is an actual model, and then you can just go and sculpt it. If it's too dense, you can, for example, like Z-remesh it. You know, you can Z-remesh it, get like a nicer little kind of model for it. It should be quite easy. Let's see if Z-remesh is going to work fine here. Let's see, geometry, Z-remesher. Let's keep a poly count of, I don't know, 5,000 should be okay, I guess. Yeah, so now it's zero meshed. It has a little bit more of a little topology in there. And then you can definitely strangle some of that, like make it a little thinner, right? Like in this area here where you have the contact between the upper teeth and the bottom teeth, and create some kind of like viscosity, you know? That would be cool, actually. I think I'm gonna add that to my model. I never done for my characters. I've done at work, but not for my characters. So yeah, something like that, you know, like add some interesting detail in there. And those bubbles, you can go as small as you want. But like I said, the bubbles themselves, I don't think they're gonna hold up. I think basically like this type of detail in here that goes across, it holds up better, but it has to be more concave, you know? I think to work, it would be nicer if it was, for example, a little bit more like inverted like that, right? I think that would work better for a refraction kind of thing. But yeah, like it's just like ideas, you know, it's like just like feeding you guys some stuff to think about. So let's take a look here. So basically like to sculpt that stuff, I show you like, it's basically like the you know, just like the carve brush to create all these little cavities and stuff, and to redefine the shape, to sharpen the tips and everything. And then we have this other pass here, which is the transparency pass, which I painted a very crappy map, which you're gonna have to you know, keep working on it. I have this transparency map here, which looks like this. So if I turn off my material here to flat, that's basically like the transparency areas, right? But they're very broad and kind of like low as well. I should keep them just around the edge in here. You know, it's like really close to what we see around here, right? Look, they're kind of like, there's like this area here is not even that transparent, like the very edge of it, but then you have a little bit of transparency right here, right, in different areas. So you can try to do that, and you can actually add the same transparency you have in the front, in the back, right? So you have like transparency going all the way across. Now we're gonna think like, okay, so if it's transparent, how is it gonna look like in the render? And the render has, most of those renders have an option that is to make like the transparency blurry, right? So we can create like kind of like a milky version of the transparency. So let's take a look at the Maya here. And let's look at the shader that I have for it's the kind of shader that I'm gonna have to tweak, obviously, to make sure that it works fine for my model here. But let's take a look at all this stuff. Let's try, see if I can just do a control of this one. Okay, let's unhide my, oh, let's keep this stuff hidden, like the hair stuff. Let's just unhide what we need here. So the head, and then I'm gonna have my eyes here, all this stuff. And then the teeth. Maybe I don't even need the head right now. I'm just gonna unhide the teeth here. Let's see what my teeth is, right? Maybe I forgot to actually name it, which is silly. Let's see where I put it. Teeth. It's just like out of place, but it's there. So I have teeth and I have the tongue in there. So let's do like a quick render of this thing and see what we have so far. Let's save this one just for reference for me later. And let's take a look. Can I even like hide the eyes as well? Let's just hide the eyes. And my freaking depth of field, right? Which is silly. I mean, like if you're doing like quick renders in the middle of the night, like I was doing yesterday at 3 in the morning, you should not be rendering with freaking, you know, depth of field. You can fake the depth of field in Photoshop, you know? And I used to do this all the time, just like fake it, just paint a little blur in there, you know? So let's take a look here. So you're gonna notice that I have the transparency in place, but the reflection is still pretty hot and, you know, looks kind of like a metallic, like I mentioned before. So if I go, let's try to get, even the color, you know, is a little dark and saturated. I'm gonna brighten it a little bit. So let's get, for example, an area like this. Down there. So you can see some of the transparency. Let's take a look. So you see like there's a little bit of transparency right across here, right? Like I said, that the shader is not great just yet, but let's play with those parameters so you can see how it changes everything here. So if you click the teeth, my material right now is nothing to be proud of, but I can share with you whatever I have so far. So let's just eliminate this and then bring this one up. Yeah. And then let's go back to lower teeth right here. So my material looks like this. So my specular is pretty hot right now. I have like a double spec. So the first one is 0.030, but I would ignore this for now, you know, because like, as you can tell, it's not completely working just yet. And then for my coat, I have like 1, which is very, very metallic. And the index of refraction, that's why I'm mentioning that. Don't go over 1.5, it starts to look kind of metallic. So I'm gonna bring it down to, let's say 1.4 here. Let's see in comparison what this one does. So between that and this. So overall, it's a tiny little bit of a change, but I can see that around here, it's going to start looking less metallic. So maybe I can go even a little bit further than that, you know. See, like there's this blue tint in here that's actually being removed in here. So it looks a little bit more natural now. So it's a good indication that things might be related to this. Maybe might be a little bit too high, but like maybe 130. But let's take a look at the transmission here to see how I'm applying that map in there. You see I have this extra roughness in here. So let's do a couple of things here first. In the weight map, where the transparency is plugged, I have my color balance. So this basically like alpha is luminous, right? It's black and white map. And then I have my alpha gain tweaked in here. So let's see what happens if I have like full on 1. Let's do 1. You see how transparent it is now? And it's going across, right? All the way to the other side. But there is also this, check this out. So if I go here and I go to the extra roughness to 0, now this is it's completely transparent, right? It's gonna be like a glass, basically like the refraction is gonna look super sharp and everything. If there's anything behind it, for example, if you go for a certain angle, let's see a profile of the face, probably this is gonna refract everything almost like a lens, you know, it's like if you don't have any extra roughness. But as soon as you start adding this, it actually blurs the refraction inside of it. So it's gonna be a combination of using less transparency, and when it hits the transparency, it gets blurry inside, you know, it's like it's gonna be important to create that effect of transparent, but at the same time, you know, translucent and milky. And then for this guy here, now I can actually tweak my alpha gain to have less and less transparency, right? So if I have like at 3.27 that I just clicked in there, it looks a little bit better, right? But if you go like all the way to 0, that's gonna be completely solid. So you're not gonna be seeing any type of transparency, right? So it has to be a very, very subtle effect. If you go too high with it, then you start seeing kind of like holes, you know? Everything looks like, oops, I used the wrong one. You start seeing as holes in there, and then that's not exactly what you want, you know? So I would look at the reference and see exactly where they are. In this case here, they're in the wrong place, so I'm gonna have to actually paint the edge a little bit more solid and add transparency just in this area, and just enough of it. So probably gonna be around like 0.1 something, just to add that little hint of transparency, you know? And then here, if I go back, you see like the color of the spec is blue at this point, right? I'm kind of adding a little bit of a tint to the color because I thought it looked nicer, but maybe I went too far. You know, it's like maybe I can keep it white for a bit and then see if I can, you know, tweak that. And then so basically like adding the extra roughness in there, and then the weight for the transmission using that map that I just showed you guys, that should help a lot, you know, to add to create this effect. Now there's another thing I did here, which was in the subsurface map. So for the subsurface, I have a bunch of things plugged in here. So the first one plugged right here is this. So I'm using like the teeth lower, the same color map, right? So that's the color map that's assigned, basically like the same way we do for the skin, right? The subsurface color. Now for the radius, I think it's the same thing. So I have like also the color plugged in there. So the color of the radius is going to be equivalent to the teeth and the gums, just because you see like I have like both objects together. So if I add just like a yellow subsurface color, it's going to affect the gums as well, right? So that's why I'm kind of keeping that way. nothing stops me from, for example, like in either one of them, for example, like instead of like just a pure coloring here, I can incorporate, you see like there's an offset in here. If I drag the offset down, it gets very, very, very saturated, right? Which maybe is not too bad for the teeth in here, but the gums are getting super red. So what I can do is like select those faces in ZBrush and just paint like a lighter color for the gums themselves, and kind of like deal with the teeth as it is, because I think the teeth is gonna look nicer if it's yellower. Maybe a little bit less saturated, right? Like something like that would be helpful. But yeah, like just tweaking the color of the map at this point. And then for the radius, for the scale here, I did a little trick. So instead of like using the pure scale, which was like either everything is translucent or subsurfacey or not, right? I actually used the same map that we just painted, the black and white in there, for the transparency. And then I'm using this map with some offsets in here, like 0.68 and 0.48. Let's do like 1 and 0 so you can see what happens in here. This would be the default. So that would be very, very translucent overall, right? Like it's very, very translucent. Remember that for the skin, we are using around like 0.135, right? So we shouldn't go like 1 with this, right? We should keep at least like something that's similar. So let's try like something like 0.135. It's kind of similar to what we have in there for the skin, right? And then if you want to go more solid, then you bring it down. That's why I brought down, I think, to make it more solid. But then the alpha offset here, you can play with it. Remember that the alpha offset is the black parts of the map that we actually offsetting and getting more subsurface, right? So if I crank it all the way, it's going to look like a candle like this, right? So you get like that super candle looking. So it's got like something in between, you know, it's like you push a little bit further, but maybe like this, let's say like the top areas where the black is, let's say we want to do something more hardcore than the skin itself. So we can keep like the lower end, we can keep the lower end at 135, for example, right? So that's basically be equivalent to the skin we are using. And then the tip of it, you can actually crank to something, let's say like a double that, for example, 270. Let's see if it's too strong. So that means that right around this area where the mask is gonna get more subsurfacey, you know, around there. Maybe not the best approach, you know, it's like maybe physically is not gonna be, you know, the best approach, but it's a trick you can try to use, you know, it's like to add more of that transparency subsurface at the same time, you know, it's an option there. Maybe I went too far, maybe a little bit more, and that would help, like 170 perhaps, you know, something like that. But just like ideas again, you know, it's like something to think about. So at this point here, I'm gonna have to start tweaking this whole thing. And also I have a map for a specular. Oh, Jesus, it's so hard to grab this sometimes. I have a map for a specular, which is basically separating what is the gums and the teeth. So if you look at here, I have transparency, and I have this specular right here. So it's basically like my specular map is super simple at this point. I still blocking it, but it's basically like more specky on the teeth, and then a little gradient in here, and then less specky around the base of it, right? So that map I'm actually assigning to this here. So let's see if I go back. So basically like transmission, specular. So I have the specular map assigning here, which is the same one, and then I have some offset. So the offset here is doing this, right? So I have my alpha gain, so the white is at 1, that's the maximum, but I'm cranking the exposure to 3 in here, so it's getting like very super shiny. Let's do like a little tweak here, because it's a little bit, still a little metallic. So store snapshot, and let's bring this one down to, let's say 2, something like that. So from this to that, right? It's a little bit more natural, just to get a little bit less specular overall. But then there's the alpha offset here. And then for the 1 in here is basically like the whites. And then for the blacks, I'm actually bringing the blacks down. So that means that anything that's gums related is gonna get more and more, less and less specular, right? So if I go like, let's try -1 here, let's see what happens. You see the gums start to get less and less specky. but then around here is still the same specular, right? So basically that's what I'm doing here. So let's try to minus 0.6, for example. So just tweaking between like those areas, you know, if it was like a plain black and white, it would be easier to keep because you don't need to use the offsets in that case, right? But in this case here, I need the offsets just to help me out to separate the two things. But yeah, like at this point here, for a yellow kind of teeth, it's already looking better than it was a few minutes ago. You know, it's like just not having that metallic feel to it. But the cheat that I'm doing here, actually, when I sculpted the teeth, I actually duplicated to save myself some time, right? I duplicated the bottom teeth and I made the top teeth. So basically like both of them share the exact same topology, which can be very helpful, right? So I have the same amount of teeth, same number of teeth, but they are very different in shape. But they share the same topology and the same UVs. So this is very helpful because now if I want to do a concept like this, I simply like tweak this one and assign the same material to the top teeth, and then I get the stuff for free. So like all this stuff here is coming from the very same mapping here. But again, like it's kind of like a concept thing, right? Because at some point I have to actually make them look different. But also in this case here for my portrait, it's gonna be like this. Maybe I'm not gonna see that much, you know? It's gonna be different enough that I don't need to tweak that much. But yeah, it's like, just like I have to give you the information and then you guys do whatever you need with the information, you know? But yeah, so I'm kind of like happier already with this, but I'm gonna keep tweaking it and try to get better results with it. I mean, like it still looks very translucent overall, the whole thing. And it might be a mix between like the transparency level in there or the color itself. Maybe I have to go less yellow overall. But at the same time, when I look at my reference, he had like very, very yellow teeth. So that's what I'm gonna have to keep an eye out for. Let's see if this guy here can see. Look how yellow it is. So yeah. All right, guys, that's basically what I had for you today. I mean, like try to squeeze as much stuff as possible and cover the stuff that I promised to cover, like the teeth and other things. But then tomorrow is gonna be our last official meeting, right? Like, and then we can talk about everything that's left. I mean, like you can think about the things that you can discuss tomorrow. Again, like if you have any questions about like previous models you saw of mine or something in the current model, something that you thought like, oh, this is not clear enough. Seems like, you know, there's something else you're doing there that I'm not seeing. Please bring it up, you know, it's like so we can actually look at it and make sure that the questions are mostly solved. And then we take easy tomorrow. I mean, like it's been like a very intense, I would say like 4 weeks. There's a lot of information in there, you know, it's like a lot of stuff to pay attention to. There are little details that sometimes you miss one step and then all of a sudden nothing works, right? Like a good example is the scale of the scene, right? I show you guys how to set up the scale of the scene, and all of a sudden like Arnold doesn't respect that scale. You have to convert to centimeters to be able to actually nail the depth of the subsurface scattering, right? So that's the kind of thing, you know, it's like that if you miss, you kind of like, you know, what should I do now? But yeah, think about it. And then between today at night after the class, and then tomorrow I'm gonna be posting the new links for the you know, for the reviews. And then I'm gonna see you guys on Saturday, you know. But tomorrow we have our last meeting, and let's make the best out of it and take it easy and discuss anything actually, you know, it's like any questions and industry, whatever goes, you know. There are certain things I cannot talk about because of NDA, obviously, but for the most part, you know, it's like let's talk about stuff and you know, talk about inspiration, you know, path, trajectory, aspirations, whatever it is, you know, it's like and make a fun class tomorrow. All right, guys, always a pleasure. Thank you so much, and I see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you, Chris.
Awesome, Chris. Thank you.
No problem. Bye.